Have you ever watched someone shrink in a room full of people simply because the world decided they didn't fit? In a small town cafe tucked between routine and loneliness, one young woman was used to being invisible until someone chose to see her. By the time Callie tied the strings of her apron and stepped behind the chipped blue counter, the morning rush at Willow and Pine Cafe was already in full swing. Haverhill wasn't a big city, but it moved fast enough to forget kindness. Forks scraped against plates, orders flew across the kitchen pass, the air smelled of burnt toast and tired dreams. Callie moved through it all, quietly, pouring coffee, stacking plates on her forearm, answering customers without looking them too long in the eye. She had learned how to glide through crowds without drawing attention, not because she liked it that way, but because she had to. People noticed the scar, even if they pretended not to. A silvery line, thin and stubborn, curved from just above her right cheekbone to the edge of her jaw. It had faded over the years, but never disappeared. A mark left behind when she was 10 on a night soaked in gasoline, fear and fire. She'd pulled her younger sister from a burning van, barefoot, screaming, glass falling around her like rain. She hadn't hesitated. The paramedics called her brave. The news called her a hero. But school kids, they called her names. Strangers, they stared. The world never saw what she did. It only saw the mark it left behind. At the corner booth, near the window, 4 young professionals in sleek jackets and smug grins laughed louder than anyone else. Their watches gleamed in the light. Their voices carried a kind of cruelty, polished by confidence. As Callie approached with their plates, one of the men tilted his head and muttered just loud enough, "That's one way to lose your appetite." Another snorted, not bothering to lower his voice. "What happened, sweetheart? You wrestle with a lawnmower." Laughter erupted. It was sharp, greasy, the kind that lingers. Callie's hands didn't tremble, but her ears burned. She placed each dish, gently, one by one, refusing to look up. A third voice added, "Do they recruit staff straight from horror houses now?" And then the fourth leaned back, sipping his coffee, with a smirk. "You'd make a killing at Halloween." Ever considered that? The room quieted just a notch, enough for the shame to echo. Callie turned slow and calm. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "Anything else I can get you, sir?" The man blinked, caught off guard by her stillness. "Yeah, maybe a mask," his friend chuckled. "Or a curtain." She didn't flinch, just nodded once and walked away, the clink of her shoes, barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. Across the cafe, seated alone with a mug of black coffee and a notebook, creased from use, a man had seen everything. His coat was worn, but clean, his eyes alert, but kind. His name was Rowan. He didn't shift in discomfort, like the others. He didn't pretend he hadn't seen. Instead, he leaned forward, gaze following Callie's quiet figure as she disappeared behind the counter, carrying the weight of ridicule with the grace of someone who had done it many, many times before. "Thanks," Callie said, softly, sliding the check onto the table, her tone neutral like a well-rehearsed script. Rowan looked up from his notes and shook his head gently. "No," he said, his voice low. "Thank you." She blinked, caught off guard by the weight behind his words. "For what?" she asked. "For carrying that moment with grace," he replied. "More than those men ever deserved. Most people would have yelled, stormed out, maybe thrown a cup of coffee their way. You didn't." A faint smile pulled at the corner of her lips, dry and wry. "Tempting," she murmured. He smiled back, then paused for a moment before adding, "Funny, isn't it? How some people mistake resilience for ruin. They see a mark on your face and think it means something is broken, when really they're just too small to comprehend what strength actually looks like." Callie looked at him more fully now. There was no pity in his voice, no curiosity lurking behind his eyes, only steadiness. She didn't say anything. Not yet, but something inside her shifted just a little. He extended a hand across the table. Rowan, she hesitated, then placed hers in his. Callie, glad to meet you, Callie, and for a moment, brief, silent but entirely real, she felt seen in a way she hadn't in years, not despite her scar, but maybe with it. 3 days passed, the cruel laughter from table 5 still lingered in her memory, like the scent of burnt toast, bitter and hard to shake. Callie tried to bury it under long shifts and quiet tasks, but the hurt had a way of slipping through, especially during the still moments. Wednesday came quietly, the breakfast rush had ebbed, leaving behind the soft hiss of the espresso machine and an old jazz tune humming through the speakers like a half-remembered dream. She was wiping down the counter when she noticed him again, Rowan slipping into the same back booth near the window, the one that caught just enough light to feel like its own little world. He didn't call her over, didn't wave, he just waited, hands calm, gaze patient, as if he knew some spaces need silence to be respected. She approached a towel, slung over her shoulder. You again, she said, her tone a mix of teasing and tired. He gave her a quiet smile. I figured it was safe, no blender jokes. Flying around today? Callie let out a reluctant snort. We saved those for Saturdays. Then I picked the right day. He ordered the same as last time, just black coffee and a slice of apple pie. That's all she asked, raising an eyebrow. That's all he said, settling in, like the booth had been waiting for him. I come for the pie, she didn't answer. But when she brought the slice over, she noticed the way he looked at it. Not like food, but like memory. My mom used to make pie like this, he said. After a pause, his eyes softened, the way people's eyes do when they look backwards. It was never perfect. The crust always cracked, but it tasted like home, like you were safe no matter what. Something in her stilled. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the plate. A moment longer than necessary. She passed, she asked quietly. He nodded. Years ago. But this brings her back. Callie blinked. I made that one? Rowan smiled genuinely. That explains everything. From that day forward, he returned, always during the lull between breakfast and lunch, always sitting at the same booth, in her section. Sometimes he brought a book. Sometimes he simply watched the world beyond the window, like he was trying to remember something important. And every time he left a tip, not flashy, just a folded envelope, tucked beneath his empty plate. Neat, deliberate, unassuming, and every time Callie returned it, until his 4th visit. She picked up the plate and found the usual envelope, 2 crisp 20s, her jaw tightened. She walked over and dropped the envelope onto his table, with more force than needed. Mr. Hale, she said, standing with arms crossed. He looked up from his coffee, calm as ever. It's Rowan. I told you, she said evenly. I'm not taking this. It's not charity, he replied. It feels like pity, she said, and I've had enough of that to last a lifetime. Rowan's brow furrowed, not in anger, but concern. It's not pity, he said gently. It's gratitude. Her expression didn't soften. Gratitude doesn't come with a price tag. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice quiet but unwavering. If I pitied you, Callie, I would have walked out the first time I saw your scar, but I didn't. I stayed because the pie reminded me of home. Because your presence had grace, because... He paused. There's something about you that makes the world feel a little softer. Her breath caught, but she didn't let it show. She didn't know whether to argue or sit down. Instead, she stood frozen, her arms folded. So tightly, her knuckles turned pale. After a long beat, she spoke. You make a good case, I usually do, Rowan replied, sipping his coffee with a small smile. And then, before she could stop herself, she slid into the booth across from him. Her eyes scanned his face, gentle, open, familiar, in a strange way. You don't look like someone who eats in places like this, she said. I don't, he admitted. But lately, I'm trying to make time for the things that feel real. She tilted her head. And this feels real. Rowan met her eyes without blinking. You do. There was no flirtation in his tone, no dramatic weight, just truth. Simple, still soft, Callie stood quickly, the moment catching her off guard. I'll get you another coffee, she mumbled, walking back toward the counter. As she passed the steel pitcher by the espresso machine, she caught her reflection. Her braid hung loose over one shoulder. The scar was there, unhidden, but for the first time in a long, long while. It wasn't the first thing she saw. I told you I'm not keeping this, Callie said, placing the envelope on the table with a firmness that left no room for debate. Rowan looked up from his coffee, unfazed. It's not about keeping, he said gently. It's a thank you. Then just say, thank you, she replied. I just did. With your wallet, she countered, her voice steady, but her posture said, more, arms folded tight, knuckles turning pale. You think someone like me wants your pity? His brow furrowed. He leaned forward, voice calm, but unmistakably sincere. It's not pity, Callie. I've lived long enough and been stared at long enough to know the difference. The words settled between them like a shift in air pressure. The cafe quieted, though no one else seemed to notice. A tip can be gratitude, he continued. Not charity. If I'd pitied you, I wouldn't have come back. I would have walked out the first time I saw your scar. He paused, letting the silence hold the weight, but I didn't. I stayed because the pie tasted like home, because your service carried grace, and because there's something about you that makes the world feel just a little less harsh. Callie stared at him, her chest tightened. Heart thudding loud enough, she swore he could hear it. She wasn't sure if she wanted to snap at him or thank him. After a pause, her voice came out quieter than she expected. You make a pretty solid case. I usually do, he said with a small smile, taking a sip of coffee, like the moment hadn't just cracked something open. She hesitated. Then, almost before she realized it, she slid into the booth across from him. You don't look like someone who eats in places like this, she said, her tone attempting to stay casual. I don't, Rowan admitted, but I'm learning to make space for the things that feel real. She tilted her head, and this place, me. He didn't blink, didn't look away. You feel real. The words weren't heavy, they weren't flirtatious. They just were plain and still, like a truth that had waited patiently to be spoken. Callie stood abruptly, caught off guard by the stillness inside her. I'll get you another coffee, she muttered, retreating behind the counter. As she passed the polished steel pitcher by the sink, she caught a glimpse of herself, braid slipping over one shoulder, the scar on her cheek in full view. But this time, it wasn't the scar she saw first. The rain came the following week, steady and unrelenting. Outside, puddles gathered like silver mirrors along the sidewalks, umbrellas crowding the corners like blooming flowers. Inside, willow and pine, the scent of coffee and toasted bread curled through the air like warmth itself. Callie was wiping down a booth near the window when she saw him again. Rowan already seated in his usual spot, a book open in front of him, a slice of untouched pie beside a fresh cup of black coffee. He looked up and gave her that now familiar gentle smile. You're back, she said, pretending not to smile as she approached. Wasn't planning on skipping, he replied. She refilled his coffee without asking, still reading that one. Some stories are worth rereading, he said, glancing up at her. Her cheeks flushed, despite herself. You always talk like that, only when I mean it. And just like that, they slipped into a quiet rhythm. He came in often, sometimes with a book, sometimes with stories, sometimes with nothing at all but time. He asked questions, real ones, the kind that don't come from small talk, but from curiosity with care. He asked about the music she played when the diner closed, about her favorite childhood snacks, about the books she kept under her bed, but never lent out. She answered slowly, cautiously, but with each question, a little more of her hesitancy wore away. One slow afternoon, when the jazz from the radio seemed to wrap the entire cafe in soft gold, Rowan set down his book and looked at her carefully. "Callie," he said quietly, "can I ask about the scar?" Her body tensed before he could finish. She stood still, unsure air caught in her lungs. He saw it immediately. "You don't have to answer," he added gently, "only if you ever feel ready." She didn't move at first. Then, after what felt like a small eternity, she slid into the seat across from him, folding her hands on the table, like someone bracing for impact. "I was 10, she said, her voice low but steady. "My dad was driving. My little sister was in the back seat." Callie began, her voice quieter now. "We were driving home after a weekend camping trip. It was raining hard. The kind that makes everything blur." Rowan's expression shifted, the lines around his mouth tightening. The road was slick. "We hit a bend, and then a truck came out of nowhere, crossed right into our lane. My dad tried to swerve, but the tires lost grip. We went into a ditch. The car flipped." She paused, but not for long. "My dad got knocked out. My sister was stuck under her seatbelt, jammed and twisted. The car started to smoke." She stared down at her hands. "I didn't think, I just moved. Climbed over, shattered glass, pulled her through the back window. I remember the metal tearing through my face, but it didn't stop me." Rowan didn't say anything. He just listened, really listened. "I saved her," Callie said. "And after that, everything changed, but not in the way I thought it would. At school, kids didn't see someone brave. They saw something broken. The scar made them nervous. My best friend stopped sitting with me at lunch. A teacher once offered to move me to the back row, so I'd feel less exposed." Her laugh was short, humorless. "I dropped out halfway through high school. Not because I couldn't keep up, I just got tired. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt, of walking into rooms, and watching people notice the scar before they saw me." Rowan's hands curled around his mug, knuckles pale. "I'm sorry," he said. Callie shook her head. "Don't be. I got work. I kept food on the table, took care of my sister. When our dad left, we made it through. That's more than enough." There was no pride in her tone, and no bitterness either, just survival spoken plainly. "You're stronger than most people I've ever met," Rowan said quietly. Callie didn't reply. She just stood up, slowly, nodded once, and left him alone with his coffee, and the weight of her words. That evening, on her way to pick up a sandwich from the corner deli, she saw him again, but not at the cafe. Across the street, near a cracked sidewalk, an elderly woman stood at the curb, struggling with an overstuffed cart of groceries. Rain misted across her scarf. She looked lost, overwhelmed. Rowan appeared beside her. No umbrella, coat unbuttoned. He said something gentle, then he lifted the cart for her, like it weighed nothing, walked her across the street, helped her into a waiting cab, closed the door and turned away, before the driver even pulled off. Callie watched from behind the cover of the bus stop awning. She didn't call out. She didn't need to. That night, back in her apartment, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Her fingers traced the curve of the scar along her cheek. She didn't cry, but for the first time in a long while she wondered, could someone look at her and see more than pain? Maybe someone already had. The day had been long. The kind of day where snide remarks blurred together, where tips were light and customers heavier than usual. By the time she closed the register, her shoulders ached and her heart felt heavy. As she grabbed her coat, she noticed him outside, beneath the lamppost, hands in his pockets, waiting like he had nothing but time. When she stepped out, Rowan straightened. "Rough shift?" he asked. "You could say that," she muttered, not quite meeting his eyes. He hesitated, then said gently, "There's this little place down near the docks. The food doesn't taste like cardboard, and no one rushes you out. Want to come?" She blinked, surprised. Her first instinct was to say no, to retreat as she always had, but something inside her gave way. Maybe because she was tired, or maybe because for once someone wasn't pushing, just asking. "Okay," she said quietly. But no pie talk tonight, Rowan grinned. Deal. The diner by the water was quiet and softly lit with wooden floors that creaked and jazz music whispering from hidden speakers. For the first time in days, Callie felt her shoulders relax. They sat near a window, the river outside gleaming under scattered light. Conversation came easier than she expected. They talked about books they'd never finished, songs they kept on repeat, and the most ridiculous customer complaints she'd ever heard. Rowan told her stories too, not flashy ones, but stories that lingered, about a tea seller in Kyoto, a child laughing in Nairobi, a thunderstorm he once watched roll in over a field of wheat. When their food arrived, they ate slowly, unhurried, and when the rain began to fall, again soft and steady outside the window, neither of them said anything, they just stayed on the drive back. The car was quiet, warm, with soft, instrumental music. Callie leaned her head against the window, eyes growing heavy. She dozed off just briefly. Rowan glanced over. A strand of hair had slipped behind her ear, revealing her scar in full. Under the soft glow of the dashboard light, it wasn't jarring. It was just there, a part of her, like a story written in skin. He reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny wildflower, purple, delicate, imperfect. She had once admired that same kind on the windowsill at Willow and Pine. He placed it gently against her cheek, just over the scar, not to hide it, but to frame it. The little diner by the river was all dim lighting and warm wood. Jazz spilled softly from unseen speakers, notes drifting like autumn leaves. The floor creaked beneath their steps, but not in a way that disturbed. It sounded like memory. Callie felt her shoulders drop, the first release she'd allowed in days. They settled into a booth by the window. Outside, the water shimmered under scattered street lights, a quiet pulse in the dark. Conversation came easily, surprisingly so. They talked about books. They never finished the tragedy of elevator music and the funniest, strangest customer complaints Callie had endured. Rowan shared stories, too, not loud or boastful, but quiet. Windows into distant places, a tea vendor with wrinkled hands in Kyoto, a laughing boy chasing bubbles in Nairobi. The way a thunderstorm once rolled across an open field like it was teaching him how to breathe slower. When their food arrived, they ate slowly, not out of politeness, but comfort. No need to rush, and when rain began again, outside soft and steady, they lingered. The ride home was quiet. Rowan played something instrumental, light enough not to ask anything of them. Callie leaned her cheek against the window, the hum of the engine, the rhythm of the rain, and the warmth of her full belly, lulling her toward sleep. She dozed off, head tilted gently to the side. A strand of hair slipped behind her ear. Rowan glanced over. In the glow of the dashboard, her scar was visible, clear, unhidden, but in that light, it was something different. Not a wound, not even a flaw, just a part of her, etched by fire and survival. He didn't look away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket, fingers closing around something small, a bloom, wild and imperfect, soft purple, and barely holding together. She had admired it once, passing by a flower cart outside the café. He gently placed it on her cheek, just over the scar, not to hide it, to frame it. Minutes later, Callie stirred. Her hand lifted instinctively to her face. Fingers brushed against something soft. She turned to him, still half asleep. "You put this here?" she asked. Rowan nodded, eyes steady on the road ahead. "I found it earlier. Figured it belonged somewhere special." She turned the flower between her fingertips. "Why there?" He glanced at her, then back to the road. "Because it's a beautiful place, one of a kind." She swallowed, heart catching a little in her throat. "Some people see scars and think they're signs of damage," Rowan added softly. "But I think they're stories, and that one yours? It's the story of someone worth knowing." Silence settled between them, not heavy, not awkward, just Still, when they pulled up in front of her apartment, Callie didn't reach for the door right away. She turned to him, really looked, and for once she didn't tilt her head, didn't shift her hair. To hide what she always thought was too much, she let the scar be seen. "I've spent years trying to keep this covered," she whispered. Rowan's response came without hesitation. "Maybe it's time to stop." She nodded. "Just this once." Then with quiet grace, she tucked the flower behind her ear and said, "Thank you for dinner, for seeing me." Rowan smiled. "You're welcome, Callie." And that night, for the first time in years, she stepped out of the car, not as a girl trying to shrink into the shadows, but as a woman, choosing to walk forward with her whole story in the light. The next morning, back at Willow and Pine, Callie was behind the counter, refilling sugar jars and pretending not to be tired. Her phone buzzed. Probably a delivery update or a message from the flower supplier. She didn't check it, but before she could finish wiping the counter, Mia, her coworker, rushed over, eyes wide, holding out her phone like it was a live wire. "Callie," she said, voice caught somewhere between panic and awe. "Have you seen this?" Callie frowned as she took the phone from Mia's trembling hands. It was a gossip site, one of those she'd never visited, never cared to. Loud fonts flashing headlines, the usual mix of celebrity scandal and invasive speculation. But right there, front and center, was a photo, blurry, off-angle. Clearly taken, in secret, but unmistakable, her profile lit by the soft, golden light of the Riverside Diner, the scar along her cheek, faint but visible. She was mid-smile, her expression open, unguarded, and sitting beside her, laughing, leaning in familiar, was Rowan Hale. The headline screamed like a punch to the chest, "Billionaire in hiding." Rowan Hale spotted dining, with disfigured waitress and downtown dive. The words blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again as her eyes filled with something she couldn't name yet. Shock, shame, fury. Her blood ran cold. She scrolled, fingers trembling. The comments were already flooding in. Some were curious, a few kind. But most? Charity case. Publicity stunt. Beauty and the Beast. Low-budget edition. Guess billionaires have a thing for broken girls. Must be trying to rehab his image. The cruelty jumped off the screen like knives. Words she thought she'd grown immune to now, reopened wounds. She didn't know, still bled. Callie dropped the phone like it burned her. It hit the counter with a sharp clatter. She didn't finish her shift, didn't explain, didn't grab her things properly. She just walked out into the street, flour on her apron, coffee stains on her shoes like someone trying to escape her own skin. By the time she reached her apartment, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications stacked like bricks on her chest. Texts, missed calls, emails, even news alerts. She turned it off, tossed it onto the couch, as if the silence might undo the noise. Her hand went to her face, out of instinct. Fingertips brushing the scar. It felt huge, loud. Like it was shouting now, like it had swallowed her whole and left nothing else behind. She sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the only light a flickering street lamp bleeding through the curtains. It was too much, too fast, too exposed. A knock broke the silence. She froze. Then came another, soft, steady, and a voice. "Callie, it's me." She stood slowly, crossed the room as though every step cost her something. When she opened the door, Rowan stood there, no suit, no polished smile, just him, still uncertain, waiting. "Can we talk?" he asked. She stepped aside, wordless. Once inside, her arms folded tightly across her chest, every line in her body pulled taut. "You knew," she said. Before he could speak, "I didn't leak anything, Callie." "I swear no," she cut in sharp. "But you knew this could happen. You knew who you were, what your name meant, what it would do to someone like me." He took a step toward her. She took one back. "For you, this is just another headline, another Tuesday, another story. Someone spins for clicks." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "For me, I just became a punchline, a scar with a waitress attached. Rowan's face tightened not with offense, but with something closer to grief. "You're not a headline," he said softly. "You're not a side note in my story. You're the most real thing I've known in a long, long time." She looked at him, eyes burning. "Do you even understand what it's like?" she asked. "To be stared at. Not like a person, but like a spectacle. To have strangers weigh your pain like it's either beautiful or disgusting." "No," Rowan admitted. "But I want to." He stepped closer, voice low and steady. "I want to understand. I want to learn, and I want to stand beside you. While I do." Her lip trembled. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I didn't ask to be seen like this." "I know," he said. "But I saw you long before that photo, and I haven't stopped since." She looked away, blinking hard against everything swelling in her chest. I need space." Rowan nodded, accepting. Without argument. "I'll wait," he said. "As long as it takes," and he turned and walked to the door, each step quiet, careful. Then the door clicked shut, behind him like a page turning, or a chapter closing. She hadn't wanted to write. Alone in her apartment, Callie sat in the dim light, the silence pressing in like a second skin. She reached for her phone and turned it on. The screen lit up instantly. Messages, missed calls, chaos waiting. But she didn't check any of it. Instead, she opened the photo. Not the headline, not the comments, just the image. Just that moment, the way Rowan had looked at her, like there was nothing in the world more natural than her being exactly as she was. The way she'd almost believed, truly believed, that she was worthy of being seen, of being loved. Her thumb hovered, and then she turned off the screen again, letting the darkness return. She leaned back, heart hollow, not sure which ache was worse, being forgotten or being remembered, like this. For days, Willow and Pine stood without her. Callie had left her apron folded on the break room shelf, her final paycheck untouched in the drawer. Her phone stayed off. Her voice stayed silent. She moved through the world like a shadow, unseen, unspoken, unmoored. Rowan had sent messages. She never read them, not because she was angry, but because she was afraid that no matter how much she rebuilt, she would always be reduced to that photo, that scar, that narrative. And so instead of looking outward, she returned inward to a room she hadn't opened in years. The spare room in her apartment, the one with the covered easel, the dusty oil paints in a cracked tin, canvases leaned against the wall. Like forgotten echoes, she pulled the sheet away slowly, like unwrapping something fragile, like reopening a wound. The first brushstroke was clumsy, the second unsure, but then her hand remembered, memory stirred, and muscle and motion and color bloomed quietly across the canvas. She painted for hours, for days. No plan, no audience, just the soft rhythm of creation, just silence and colors and healing. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the window and warmed the floor in golden streaks, a knock came at the door bin. Her little brother, now taller than her, now grown, but still the same quiet soul she had carried through fire. He stepped into the room and froze. His gaze fell on the half-finished canvas propped against the wall. "You're painting again?" he said, his voice almost reverent. Callie nodded. Still focused, brush in hand, he sat beside her, silent for a moment. "I miss this," he murmured. A soft smile tugged at her lips. "Me, too." He picked up a brush, turned it in his fingers, like it was something sacred, then softly. Like he wasn't sure if he should say it, he added, "You know, you're the first person I ever trusted." Callie blinked. "What?" "That night," Ben said. "When the smoke was rising, and I couldn't move, I thought I was going to die." His voice wavered, but he kept going. "But then I saw you bleeding, crawling through glass. You weren't thinking about yourself. You just came for me." Callie's hand trembled. She set the brush down. "You carried that scar for both of us," Ben said, "and not once did you ever make me feel like I ruined your life." Tears welled before she could stop them. You were a kid, she whispered. So were you, he replied. But you were the bravest person I've ever known. When he left that evening, Callie stood alone in the hallway. In front of the mirror she had once avoided like a threat. For years, she had only caught glimpses of herself in passing, quick, fractured, incomplete. But now she looked fully. The woman staring back at her was quiet strength. The scar no longer shouted. It simply existed, soft pale, glinting in the light like silver thread woven into canvas. And this time, she didn't turn away. For the first time, she thought, this isn't what ruined me. Maybe this is where I begin. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was beautiful, not that night. She had told herself, and that was enough. Across town, an envelope sat on Rowan's desk, unmarked, no logo, no return address, just his name, written in careful script, looped letters and soft curves he recognized instantly. Inside was a single piece of stationery, folded once Rowan unfolded the letter, slowly, as if it might vanish, if he rushed Rowan. Thank you, not just for seeing me, but for not looking away. I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed to find out if I was still someone. When no one was watching, I think now, I am. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know, Callie. He read it once. Then again, and then without thinking, folded it with both hands and pressed it gently to his chest. A week later, an unexpected envelope arrived in Callie's mailbox. A small invitation. No fanfare, no gold embossing. Just a short message about a community art exhibit being hosted at the old train station in downtown Haverhill. Someone had submitted her name, said her work mattered. She almost didn't go, but something inside her, maybe the part that had begun to bloom again, said she should. The old railway station had been transformed. Strings of white lights hung from the rafters like stars caught mid-fall. Paintings and photographs lined the exposed brick walls. Children's art hung beside abstract splashes of color. Portraits, full of quiet depth. Callie walked through the space carefully, her heart pounding, her breath shallow. The smell of paint and possibility surrounded her. She had submitted just one piece, a small oil painting, her younger brother, age. 7 sitting at their old kitchen table. Eyes lit with laughter. She hadn't expected anyone to notice, but someone had. And then, near the heart of the room, she saw it. A larger canvas, framed carefully, lit softly from above. It wasn't hyper-realistic, but it was her, the curve of her jaw, the unruly fall of her hair, the half-smile she wore when she was caught between defense and surrender, and the scar. It was there too, but not as a flaw. It shimmered, faint and luminous, like a brushstroke, made of silver, like something the light had chosen to touch. Beneath the frame, a simple placard read, Callie, in Bloom Rach. Her breath caught, and then she felt it. That quiet stillness in the air. She turned. Rowan stood just beyond the glow of the light. Not in a suit, not with pretense, just him. Coat open, hands in his pockets, eyes soft and steady. I didn't know you'd come, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hoped, he replied. The rest of the gallery blurred away. Only the two of them remained. You painted that? She asked, her voice caught in the air between awe and disbelief. He nodded. Every night for a month. I wasn't trying to capture your face, he added. I was trying to paint what I saw. The day you tucked that flower behind your ear, her eyes shimmered. I saw a woman who had spent her whole life surviving, he said. But in that moment, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was blooming. Callie took a small step toward him. You always see more than you're supposed to. He smiled, the kind that only happens when words matter. Only when it matters. She looked at him, then truly looked. All the fear, all the space, all the silence between them, softened, folded in, and disappeared. I never wanted to be anyone's inspiration, she said. I just wanted to be someone. You already were, Rowan replied. Long before I met you. She bit her lip, fighting the smile. You never stopped painting, did you? He shook his head. Not after I met you. Then voice quieter, more raw. I used to think strength meant standing alone, building walls, keeping people out. But you showed me it's about letting someone in, even when it's terrifying, especially when it is. Tears spilled down her cheeks, soft and free. Rowan reached for her hand, Callie. He whispered, voice breaking. I've seen you fierce, I've seen you graceful, but right now, you're the most radiant thing I've ever seen. She squeezed his fingers. And you're still the man who brings pie just to talk. He laughed quietly, and she stepped into his arms. This time she didn't flinch when he touched her cheek. This time the scar wasn't something in the way. It was part of the moment. And this time, when they stood close, it wasn't about healing each other. It was about choosing to stay. Morning light poured gently through the front windows of a quiet little bakery, casting golden warmth onto the checkered tiles, like sunlight drawn by hand. Above the door, a wooden sign read, Scarlet and Kindness, its letters hand-painted slightly uneven, but full of care. Just below in smaller print, where every story matters, inside the air was rich with the scent of cinnamon and vanilla. Fresh loaves cooled on open racks, raspberry tarts shimmered behind glass like small treasures waiting to be chosen. The space didn't feel like a shop, it felt like a hug. Callie moved behind the counter with quiet confidence, tying her apron with practiced ease. Her long braid hung over one shoulder, and the scar on her cheek, once hidden, once hated, was now simply part of her, like the name above the door scarlet, for the color that once reminded her of pain, kindness, for the thing that transformed it into something she could carry with pride. Customers came slowly, some for coffee, some just to sit in silence. Many came for the pastries, but stayed for something gentler, a kind look, a patient smile, the quiet understanding that here they didn't have to be anything other than themselves. Near the register sat a small jar with a note taped to the front. Pay it forward for someone still finding their way. In the back corner, by a window that always caught the afternoon sun, Rowan sat with a cup of the tea and a notebook. He rarely wrote in anymore. He had helped Callie open the bakery, not loudly, not for credit, just enough to give her wings. This was her space, her light. He was simply honored to witness it bloom that afternoon. The garden behind the shop came alive. There was no altar, no aisle, no elaborate script, just a wooden table beneath strings of fairy lights, wildflowers scattered like confetti across the grass, napkins tied with bits of twine, a homemade cake waiting patiently on the windowsill. Two children, Callie's younger brother Ben and Rowan's niece, raised glasses of milk like royalty and laughed like the world was theirs to hold. Callie wore a soft cream-colored dress. A streak of flour still brushed her cheek from the morning's last-minute batch of scones. A crown of daisies rested in her hair. She walked barefoot across the grass. Rowan waited, eyes shining. I don't have a speech, he said, his voice barely a whisper. No perfect vows, just this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside, a simple silver ring. No diamond, no glint, just a single word, etched on the inside. Whole, I didn't fall in love with your scar, Rowan said, looking into her eyes. You were already beautiful, but the scar, it's part of your story, and I love all of it. He paused. I love all of you, Callie's breath caught. Her hands trembled. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply nodded, eyes brimming, and smiled through tears. And that was enough. Later that week, morning sunlight once again spilled across the bakery floor. The scent of rising dough and vanilla filled the space like memory. The front door creaked open. A girl, maybe 16, stood in the doorway. Hoodie pulled low, hands stuffed deep into her pockets. A large birthmark covered her chin. Her eyes flickered toward Callie, then toward a small, help wanted sign taped to the window. She hesitated, then spoke barely above a whisper. Excuse me, I was wondering, would you ever hire someone like me? Callie didn't answer right away. She stepped around the counter, slowly wiped her hands on her apron, and knelt just enough to meet the girl's eyes. Her voice was soft but steady, warm, real, unshakable. I've been waiting for someone just like you, in this place, Callie said softly, eyes warm. We don't look for perfect. She tapped her scar gently, a playful glint in her smile. We welcome real. And real is always beautiful. The girl blinked, caught between surprise and something soft opening in her chest. Then for the first time, in what felt like days, she smiled. Outside, the world rushed on fast, loud and unforgiving. But inside, scarlet and kindness, time moved slower, softer. Here scars weren't hidden. They were honored. Stories weren't hushed. They were held. And love. Love wasn't a grand gesture or a perfect line. It was a warm loaf of bread on a rainy morning. Hands brushing it across a counter, two people choosing each other quietly again and again. It was healing, one sweet, imperfect morning at a time. Thank you for being here with us, for walking beside Callie on her journey from hiding to healing. A story that began with pain but ended in peace. If this story stirred something in you, brought you to tears, or reminded you of the quiet power in being truly seen, please like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Because here, every scar has meaning, every voice deserves to be heard, and every heart is worthy of love. We'll meet you again in the next story.